Hello, I'll be talking about the first step, which is walking towards the steps, which is basically just walking. But I'll get started. I will be going over the action, the muscles, the nerves, and the joints that are all activated when walking. So, let's begin. The joints from the neck to the ankle, which are activated when walking, are the cervical vertebrae, which is the neck, the thoracic vertebrae, which is the lower back, which both work to stabilize and balance the body and allow for coordination. So the top and the bottom are able to both successfully walk effectively. The arms and the shoulder joints are also activated when walking, which allow for, again, the stabilization of the body. For example, shoulder joints like the deltoid allow for forward and backwards motion. The bicep allow for elbow extension, which is bringing arms forward. And the tricep allows for extension of the arms, which push them back, so the movement of this. Then the next thing activated or coordinatingly, or as going down, the hip joint is then also activated, which the hip joint is also considered a ball and socket joint, which allows for the movement of forward and backward, as well as the movement of leg swinging, meaning that flexion and extension are both activated in this movement. Muscles activated in the hips are the hip joints, the glutes, meaning both the maximus and the medius, hamstrings, the abductors, and the quadriceps. Then moving forward, the knee is also moving in this movement, which is also considered a synovial hinge joint. When walking, the knee activates both flexion and extension. The hamstring and the quadriceps are both activated while walking. The quadriceps has its own group, which is within that group, all muscles are activated, which would be considered the quadriceps femurs, which is the main title of the groups, which is the rectus femoris, the vastus lateralis, vastus medialis, and the vastus intermedius. The hamstrings are also activated because of the knees, which would also be the bicep femoris, the semitendinous, and the semimembranosus. Sorry, I'm not really good with the names. And then moving forward, lastly, the ankle joint, which is also a synovial hinge joint, is also activated when walking, which in the movement, the ankle moves both ways, which would be dorsiflexion and plantar flexion, because walking and sorry. The muscles activated when this happens are, for plantar, would be the gastrocnemius, the soleus, the tibialis posterior, and the flexor digitorum longus. And then for dorsiflexion, the flexor digitorum longus is also activated, while also the tibialis anterior being activated. Which this is it for the first part, or the first step. Then I'll be moving forward and I'll be continuing with the first step the first part of getting back up from tying your shoe.
Now moving on to phase 2, walking up the stairs. 5 joints I noticed at play here was the hip joint, the knee joint, the ankle joint, the shoulder joint, and the lumbar spine. So first I'll start with the hip joint. It's a ball and socket joint. Right here, what's signaling is the femoral nerve. Flexion is occurring in the hip when they're going up the stairs. It flexes to place the leg on the step and then extends momentarily in between each step. The muscles involved here are the gluteus maximus, the gluteus medius, and the hamstring. We see eccentric contraction at play here occurring within the hamstring as well. Next is the knee joint. This is a hinge joint. We see flexion when lifting leg and extension when preparing to hit the next step. Right here, there's a couple nerves at play. We have the femoral nerve signaling the quads, the sciatic nerve, in play due to the hamstrings. The muscles involved are the quadriceps, which include the rectus femoris, the vastus lateralis, the medialis, and the intermedius for extension. And hamstrings yet again, which is where we see the eccentric contraction occurring. Next is the ankle joint. It's a hinge joint. Dorsiflexion and plantar flexion is what's occurring here. It plantar flexes as the heel is lifted off the step, and dorsiflexes as if when it moves to the higher step in terms of placement. Muscles involved here are the gastrocnemius, the soleus, and the tibialis anterior. What's signaling them is the sciatic nerve. Next, we have the shoulder joint. It is a ball and socket joint, flexion and extension. Yet again, in this case, the swinging of the arm back and forth demonstrates that flexion and extension, which is necessary for walking up the stairs to counteract that, leg movement so that you can maintain balance. Muscles involved here are the deltoids, the rotator cuff muscles, which are the supraspinatus, infraspinatus, teres minor, and subscapularis. We have a couple nerves at play here, the axillary nerve due to the deltoid, the musculocutaneous nerve because of biceps, and the radial nerve because of the triceps. In this, what we see eccentric contraction occurring in is within the deltoid. The last one I chose for this was the lumbar spine, which is a cartilaginous joint. When walking up the stairs, in terms of what it can do, it mainly helps with stabilization and keeping posture so that they don't fall. Eccentric contraction is at play in terms of the extension in the back, which helps with keeping the back straight when climbing up the stairs, so yet again the person doesn't fall backwards. Nerves at play here are the spinal nerves, the dorsal nerve, and the ventral nerve. And the muscles we see here are the erector spinae and the erector abdominis. And those are 5 points that I thought was really valid, 5 joints, very necessary for the movement of walking up the stairs.
Hello, today I'll be doing the action of bending down to tie shoes. I'll be covering 5 joints: the ankle, knee, hips, elbow, and shoulders. The shoulders are a ball and socket joint, and when you bend over, flexion occurs in your shoulders. The anterior deltoid, pectoralis major, coracobrachialis, and biceps brachii are all affected muscles here. The anterior deltoid affects the axillary nerve, and pectoralis major affects the lateral pectoral nerve, and then the coracobrachialis and biceps brachii affect the musculocutaneous nerve. Moving on to the elbow. The elbow is a synovial or hinge joint, and when bending over, flexion occurs here as well. This affects the biceps brachii again, brachialis, and brachioradialis. In this time, the musculocutaneous nerve and radial nerve are affected. The musculocutaneous nerve is affected by the brachii, biceps brachii, and the brachialis, while the radial nerve is affected by the brachioradialis. The next joint that I'm going to be talking about is the hip ball and socket. It is a ball and socket joint, like I just mentioned, and in bending over, flexion occurs. This affects the muscles of psoas major, iliacus, rectus femoralis, sartorius, and the tensor fasciae latae. The pectineus is also a muscle affected. There's central muscle movement here in the hamstrings. And then the nerves affected is going to be the femoral nerve, the lumbar plexus, and the sciatic nerve. The femoral nerve affects the iliacus, the rectus femoralis, while the lumbar affects the psoas and the iliacus, and the sciatic affects others as well. The knees are another joint that I'm going to go over today, and that is going to be a hinge joint as well. When the foot is on the step, flexion occurs. It affects the biceps femoris, syndactynosis, semimembraniosis, and the gastrocnemius, as well as the gracilis and the sartorius. This largely uses sciatic nerve.
in the supporting leg, which is behind the front one, you see the quadriceps, which have eccentric muscle movement, and then as well as the sartorius, pectineus, and those two use the femoral nerve. The last one is going to be the ankle, which is a synovial hinge joint, and in the ankle, dorsiflexion occurs, and this is messing with the tibialis anterior, extensor hallucis longus, extensor digitorum longus, and deep fibular nerve. Inversion and eversion is also used for balance, and then inversion would be affecting the tibialis anterior and the tibialis posterior. Eversion would be the fibularus longus and the fibularus brevis. For the inversion, the nerves affected would be the deep fibular nerve and the tibial nerve, and then for eversion would be the superficial fibular nerve.
And now moving on to standing up after tying the shoes. Here are a couple joints. I will be going over 3 of them. One of them is the hip joint, ball and socket. In this case, hip extension is occurring because your legs are moving backwards as you stand up to straighten back up your posture. Muscles we see at play here is the gluteus maximus and the hamstrings. And the nerve at play to control this is the sciatic nerve. Next is the knee joint, which is a hinge joint. Knee extension muscles involved are rectus femoris, vastus lateralis, vastus medialis, and vastus intermedius. The femoral nerve is what's sending the motor signal for the knee to extend so that you can stand back up. Next, we have the ankle joint, which is a hinge joint. Here, the muscles at play are the gastrocnemius, the soleus, the tibialis posterior, which that one in particular helps with stabilization so that they don't fall when they're getting back up. Right here, we see plantar flexion at play as they're planting their feet on the ground as they raise back up. The nerve at play here is the tibial nerve. They're trying to stabilize the foot and provide support when rising back to their original stance. Vanessa will continue this.
2 joints which I would like to add to the part of getting back up from tying your shoe would be the spinal joint and the elbow joint. Specifically for the spinal joint would be the extension of the mid-back or the thoracic spine, and that will be activating the latissimus dorsi, the deltoid, and the teres major, which all go in hand of the extension of either your arms, your back, or your shoulders. Yeah, arms, back, and shoulders. But in this specific example, or in this specific joint, would be your back, because you're extending yourself, because since you're hunched back from like tying your shoe, you have to get back into your regular position in order to continue walking. So these 3 muscles are being activated by extending the mid-back. Moving forward, the extension of the elbow or the elbow joint when getting back up, which also is, it kind of goes in hand with the mid-back, and then this activates the acromius muscle and the tricep brachii, which again go in hand with extending back into your regular position in order to continue walking. Thank you.